Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you began to disappear inside that love? It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle, quiet, like fog rolling in over a familiar landscape, slowly blurring the outlines of who you were before. You smile when they smile. You dim your light so they can feel more comfortable. You shrink just a little, hoping maybe this time they'll notice how much you care. But they don't. And still you stay. You give. You wait. Louise Hay teaches that letting go of someone who doesn't value you isn't a failure. It isn't weakness. It's the beginning of remembering yourself, of standing once again in the sacred center of your own life. When someone refuses to see your light, it's not your duty to keep shining it harder. It's your invitation to turn inward, to the place where love was never meant to be begged for, but lived. Clarissa Pinkola Estes calls this moment a rite of passage, not a dramatic end, but a soulful turning. The kind of shift that only a woman who has walked through fire can recognize. Because you know, don't you? You know what it's like to keep loving someone long after the love turned cold. You know the silence of a room where affection used to live. You know the way it hurts to reach out and find nothing. And yet, this letting go, painful as it is not a loss. It's a shedding, like the snake who outgrows her old skin. Like the trees that release their leaves, not because they're dying, but because something in them knows. It's time. Time to make room. Time to rest. Time to prepare for a new season. This isn't about forgetting the past, or pretending it didn't matter. It did. It shaped you, but it doesn't define you. Letting go is not about erasing love. It's about reclaiming the pieces of yourself you left behind, while trying to be enough for someone who couldn't see your worth. So what happens when a woman finally says, "I can't keep doing this to myself"? What happens when she stops chasing validation and begins to turn her gaze inward? What becomes of the soul that was once silenced for the sake of being loved? That's the journey we begin today. Not away from someone, but back toward you, toward the woman who knows her worth, toward the self that never needed to be chosen by anyone else to be complete. Let's walk this path gently, together. The silent ache of self-abandonment. There is a silence that lives inside a woman who has forgotten herself. It's not the kind of silence that soothes. It's the kind that swells in the chest, lingers behind the eyes, and makes its home in the spaces where her voice used to be. When we stay in relationships where we are not seen, not heard, not truly cherished, we learn to quiet our own needs, not because we want to, but because it feels safer to disappear than to risk being rejected once more. This ache is not always loud. Sometimes it shows up in the way we say, "I'm fine," when we're not, in the way we smile when we want to cry, in the way we prioritize someone else's comfort over our own truth. Slowly, gently, we abandon ourselves, one small silence at a time. And yet, somewhere deep within, something in us resists, a quiet knowing, a flicker of memory. The part of us that remembers how it felt to belong to ourselves. That inner voice doesn't shout, it whispers. And the whisper says, "This isn't love, this is erasure." Many women believe that enduring this silence is the price of being loved, that if we can just be patient enough, kind enough, forgiving enough, one day, they'll turn around and see us. But what if they never do? And more importantly, what if we no longer need them to? Because here is the truth. You were not born to prove your worth through pain. You were not created to become invisible, so someone else can shine. When we seek validation from those incapable of giving it, we are not loving. We are longing, and longing, when it's not honored, turns into emptiness. That emptiness becomes the void where you start to question, am I asking for too much? Is it me? Why am I always the one who feels unseen? These questions are not born from your weakness. They are born from the silence you've been carrying. But the moment you recognize this pattern, something shifts. The moment you admit, even just to yourself, that you've been abandoning your own heart for the sake of someone else's presence, that is the moment healing begins. Not because you've solved anything, but because you've seen it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let us rest here for a moment, in that seeing, not to blame, not to shame, but to honor the part of you that has been waiting so patiently to be remembered. The illusion of worthiness, through others. Somewhere along the way, many of us were taught that love is something we have to earn, that if we give enough, endure enough, bend ourselves just right, we will finally be seen, we will finally be chosen. And so we begin to perform love, not as an expression of our truth, but as a strategy to prove we are worthy of it. It begins innocently. You love him deeply, and you hope he will see you the same way. You offer your heart, your time, your body, your loyalty, believing that the more you give, the more he will realize what he has. But often, it doesn't work that way. The more you give, the less he values it. The more you wait, the more distant he becomes. And you start to believe the lie. Maybe I'm not enough. But what if the lie isn't about you? What if the real illusion is the belief that your worth is something he can define, that his ability, or inability, to love you somehow reflects the truth of who you are? When we attach our worth to how much someone else loves us, we hand over our power. We turn love into a mirror, constantly scanning someone else's eyes for a reflection of our value. But what if that mirror is cracked? What if the person you're trying so hard to impress doesn't even know how to recognize worth, especially in someone who shines with softness, depth, and devotion? This is the heartbreak so many women carry, not just the pain of being unloved, but the confusion of feeling invisible, despite having loved so much. But true worthiness isn't earned through struggle. It isn't given by someone else's recognition. Worthiness is your birthright. It is the quiet knowing that you are valuable, not because someone chooses you, but because you exist. And here lies the most subtle trap, believing that if you just love harder, stay longer, fix more, the story will change. But love isn't about effort alone. Love that is one-sided turns into sacrifice. And a woman who constantly sacrifices herself to be loved will eventually lose her sense of self. You've loved enough. You've tried enough. You've waited long enough. And none of that was wrong. None of it makes you foolish or weak. It makes you human. It makes you brave. But maybe now it's time to ask a different question. Not, what else can I do to be loved? But what would it mean to love myself enough to stop chasing love from those who cannot give it? Because your worth was never in question. Only your belief in it was. The courage to say enough. There comes a moment in every woman's story when silence becomes unbearable. Not the silence of the other, but the silence within. The kind that grows louder every time you say yes when your heart is screaming no. The kind that aches when you pretend it doesn't hurt. That moment doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes, it's as quiet as a tear falling in the dark. Sometimes, it's just the way you exhale, tired of holding in so much for so long. To say enough is not an act of rebellion. It's an act of remembrance. You're not walking away because you stopped loving. You're walking away because you started listening to yourself, to the part of you that has been whispering all along, this is not where I thrive. This is not where I'm seen. It takes immense courage to leave what is familiar, even when it hurts, to step away from the version of love that taught you to stay small, the version that asked for your silence, your patience, your endless giving, without ever offering you a seat at the table of your own needs. Louise reminds us, you have been criticizing yourself for years, and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens. And that's what this moment is, a quiet revolution. Not against him, but for you. You've spent so long hoping he would change, that he would see you, value you, fight for you. But what if the fight was never his to win? What if the fight has always been between your desire to be chosen and your soul's deep longing to choose yourself? To say enough is not cold. It's not cruel. It's the warmest truth you can offer yourself. It's the line between surviving for love and beginning to live from love, your own. And as you draw that line, everything begins to shift. You start to see yourself not as someone who lost, but as someone who remembered her worth, her voice, her right to feel whole. This is not the end. It's a threshold. And stepping over it doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you finally start feeling for real. The grief of letting go. There is a grief that doesn't wear black. A grief that doesn't have a funeral, but lingers like a shadow in the corners of your heart. It's the grief of letting go. Not just of the person, but of everything you imagined they would be. It's the ache of losing a future that never came to life. The quiet heartbreak of releasing the dream you kept alive alone. This kind of sorrow is often invisible to the world. People may not understand why you're still sad, why you still cry, why you still remember. But grief is not always about what was. Sometimes, it's about what never got the chance to be. You may find yourself mourning the moments you thought you'd share. The laughter, the holidays, the ordinary days that were meant to feel like home. And in that mourning, shame can sneak in. Why am I still feeling this? Why can't I just move on? But you're not grieving just a man. You're grieving the part of yourself that believed this would be different, that this time, love would stay. Letting go isn't clean. It isn't linear. It's messy and raw and deeply human. It comes in waves. Sometimes gentle, sometimes violent, and each wave asks for your presence, not your resistance. To grieve is not to be weak. It's to be honest. It's to let the heart speak without rushing to silence it. And here's the truth. No one tells you. Grief is a sign of love. Not just love for him, but love for yourself, for the parts of you that dreamed, hoped, waited, for the courage it took to believe again, even when your heart had been bruised before. So allow yourself to grieve, without shame, without a timeline, without needing to explain, because every tear you shed is sacred, every sigh is a prayer, every moment of sorrow is proof that you have loved with depth and truth. And from this place of tenderness, something new will begin, not a replacement, not a distraction, but a slow and holy return to you, the emergence of the authentic self. There is a strange quiet after the storm of heartbreak, a silence that at first feels empty, but slowly begins to reveal something unexpected. In the absence of his voice, his presence, his opinion, you start to hear your own again. And maybe at first it sounds unfamiliar, timid, unsure, but it's there, beneath the noise, waiting. When we are entangled in a relationship where we are not valued, we often shape ourselves to fit into someone else's story. We bend our truth, dim our fire, soften our edges, not because we lack strength, but because we long to be loved. And in that longing, we forget. We forget the sound of our own laughter. When it's not filtered through someone else's approval, we forget the passions that once lit us up. We forget that before them we were already whole. But now there is space. And in that space, your authentic self begins to stir. Not a new version of you, not someone you have to become, but the version that's always been waiting behind the layers of survival. She doesn't need to prove. She doesn't need to perform. She doesn't need to chase. She only needs to be remembered. This emergence is not loud or dramatic. It's found in the little things, in the way you start to enjoy your own company, in the music you return to, in the quiet moment when you catch your reflection and, for the first time in a long time, you see someone you recognize, not the woman who waited, who begged, who questioned, but the one who endured, who rose, who healed. There's power in this remembering, a soft, steady kind of power, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that doesn't seek applause. It simply knows. You are not starting over. You are returning to your rhythm, your depth, your wildness, your soul. And from this return, you will begin to rebuild, not to become someone new, but to live once again as the woman you were always meant to be. The rebuilding of self-worth. After the silence, after the release, after the ache has softened into space, comes the rebuilding, not with urgency, not with pressure, but with reverence. Because when a woman decides to return to herself, she is not rebuilding a facade. She is laying the foundation of something sacred. This rebuilding doesn't happen in one grand moment. It happens in small, sacred gestures, in the way you speak to yourself in the mirror, in the way you nourish your body, in the quiet decisions that say, I matter. And each time you choose yourself, even in the tiniest of ways, something inside you begins to mend. Louise Hay often spoke of the power of affirmations, not as magic spells, but as invitations. Invitations to see yourself with new eyes, to undo the years of self-criticism, comparison, and doubt. And slowly, as these words sink in, your inner landscape begins to shift. I am worthy. I am enough. I no longer betray myself to be loved. At first they might feel foreign, hollow, but say them anyway. Write them. Whisper them. Let them rest in your chest like seeds. Because in time, with care, they bloom. Self-worth is not arrogance. It is not ego. It is the quiet, unshakable knowing that your presence matters, that you deserve tenderness, safety, truth, that your needs are not burdens, that your voice holds wisdom, that your boundaries are holy. You begin to celebrate your small wins, not because they're impressive to others, but because they are evidence of your return. You get out of bed when it's hard. You walk away when it hurts. You say no when your body tightens. These moments are victories. These are the bricks of your new foundation. And perhaps most importantly, you start to become more discerning about who you allow into your sacred space, not from fear, but from clarity. You no longer need to be chosen to feel complete. You choose yourself, daily. And from that place of inner security, you attract relationships that mirror your new truth. This is the beauty of rebuilding. It's not about becoming someone better. It's about honoring who you've always been, now with boundaries, with grace, with self-regard that is no longer negotiable, the reconnection with inner wisdom. There is a knowing inside you that has never left, even when you doubted, even when you stayed too long, even when you silenced yourself to keep the peace. It was there, quiet, steady, unmoving. It's your intuition, your inner wisdom, the voice that doesn't scream but simply waits to be heard. In the noise of a relationship where you weren't valued, this voice may have been drowned out, not because it was weak, but because you were trying so hard to hold on to someone who didn't know how to hold you. You ignored your own knowing to protect the illusion. You second-guessed your feelings to avoid the pain of seeing the truth. But the truth doesn't go away just because we turn from it. It waits. And now, as you return to yourself, that quiet voice becomes louder. Not harsh, not demanding, but clear. It begins with a subtle tension in the body, a sudden fatigue after a conversation, a moment of peace when you walk away from what no longer serves you. Clarissa Pinkola Estes wrote, "The doors to the world of the wild self are few but precious." And this is one of them. When you stop betraying your intuition in the name of hope, you step through that door. When you begin to trust what you feel more than what someone says, you reclaim your power. When you listen to the way your soul whispers, "Not here, not him, not this," you begin to walk a different path, one that leads not toward someone else's approval, but toward your own truth. Reconnecting with your inner wisdom is not about being right. It's about being whole. It's about honoring your emotions not as inconveniences, but as sacred messengers. It's about noticing when your body contracts and asking why. It's about becoming so attuned to yourself that you no longer need to be rescued. You simply return. This voice within you may have been buried, but it was never broken. It may have been quieted, but it was never gone. And now, in this chapter of your life, you are learning to trust it again. Not because it guarantees safety, but because it leads to truth. And truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is the soil where freedom grows, the transformation into wholeness. Letting go of someone who didn't value you may feel like an ending, but in truth, it is a beginning, a quiet, profound return to wholeness. Not the kind of wholeness that comes from finding the perfect partner or achieving some flawless version of yourself, but the kind that emerges when you no longer abandon who you are to be loved. This transformation doesn't come all at once. It unfolds slowly, like morning light spilling across a room you once kept dark. It's the moment you realize you don't need someone else's love to feel lovable, that your worth isn't up for negotiation, that your joy, your peace, your beauty, they exist independently of who stays or who leaves. When you let go of someone who couldn't see your light, your soul doesn't break. It breathes, it stretches, it remembers its shape, and from that remembering, you begin to live differently, not harder, not louder, but deeper, with presence, with clarity, with reverence for the woman you have become. You begin to choose differently, not because you're bitter, but because you're clear. You begin to speak your truth, not to defend it, but because it no longer scares you. You begin to move through the world with a softness that is not fragile, but fierce, because you've met the depths of your own pain, and you've survived. And in that survival, something beautiful was born. This wholeness is not the absence of longing. It's the presence of self. It's the ability to feel the ache of what could have been and still say, "I choose me." It's the strength to sit with the echoes of old stories and decide they no longer define you. You are not here to be rescued. You are not here to prove. You are not here to perform. You are here to remember. And as you do, your soul becomes radiant, not because you've finally been chosen, but because you chose yourself. Conclusion. Embracing the radiance within. There is a kind of beauty that can only be born from pain transformed. A kind of radiance that doesn't come from being seen by another, but from finally seeing yourself, clearly, gently, without apology. Letting go of someone who didn't value you is not a tragedy. It is a sacred homecoming, a return to the self you were always meant to be. As you release what never truly held you, you begin to feel the ground beneath your feet again, solid, steady, yours. You begin to walk differently, not faster, not with more noise, but with presence. You begin to carry yourself with a knowing that no longer depends on being loved to believe in your own worth. And maybe, just maybe, this is what your soul becomes when you let go. Whole, soft, strong, rooted in truth, open to love, but not defined by it, not waiting, not chasing, simply being. Louise Hay reminds us that every thought we think is creating our future. And so, may your thoughts now be rooted in compassion, in clarity, in courage, not in the echo of what you've lost, but in the truth of what you are reclaiming. You are not broken. You're just remembering who you truly are. Let this remembering guide you forward, not back into old patterns, but into new possibilities, into relationships that honor you, into a life that reflects your worth, into moments where you no longer shrink to be loved, but expand because you are. And if this message touched something in you, stay close. There is more healing, more light, more truth waiting for you. Subscribe to this channel, not just to follow content, but to walk this path together. And before you go, I invite you to click on the video appearing now on your screen. It's the next step in this journey, a deeper dive into the healing your heart is ready for. Let your soul lead the way. She knows where home is,